Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? I'm assuming.
Yes.
Okay. I'm Daniel Keller. I'm one of the psychologists here at Loyola University's Wellness Center on the Lakeshore campus, and I'm happy here to present to you today about stress involved in studying abroad and how to manage the stress and sort of what to look out for, so that you can kind of make it through your study abroad experience in as good shape as possible. And let's start with, first of all, starting what is stress exactly. And stress refers to our physical and emotional responses to environmental demands. We can go to the next slide. Um, so it can actually be caused by both positive things or negative experiences. For example, um, marriage is obviously a positive event in somebody's life, but can also be very stressful. Um, Same in the same way, divorce obviously is a negative event in somebody's life and can also be very stressful as a result of that. So it's good to know that even positive things can sometimes result in stress. And typically, when we think about stress, we want to be mindful about how it manifests inside of us. And this can either be physically, for example, feeling tired or maybe feeling nauseous, can also be emotional stress responses, like feeling really overwhelmingly sad or irritable. And then there's cognitive elements of stress, for example, having trouble all of a sudden concentrating or problems with memory. When we're seeing how much stressed we are, we want to look out for some of these things and then tend to those things so that we know that we should do something about it. Let's go to the next slide and talk a little bit about common concerns of studying abroad students. First of all, the issue of language. This can be stressful in that it can be difficult to communicate, obviously, in a different language, and you can never sort of express yourself as sophisticatedly in a foreign language than you can in your own. It's also really closely tied to our sense of identity, and so when all of a sudden you're no longer able to express yourself very well in language, it can kind of sometimes result in people feeling like a loss of identity or a loss of sense, and which can be stressful. Um, Differences in educational systems. In some countries, education is really top down and hierarchical. Students are just expected to sit there and listen, versus in the US, oftentimes the university education is quite interactive. And so getting used to a different educational system can be stressful. Making friends or dating people, definitions of friendships vary across different cultures. The concept of dating may not even exist in some cultures. And so, sort of being thrown into a situation where you might not know exactly what to do or how it goes can be stressful. Feeling misunderstood due to different communication styles, so nonverbal things. Some of you may sort of know this symbol or this gesture, which in the US typically refers to as okay. However, in different cultures, this has different meaning. In Japan, for example, this refers to money. In Russia, it refers to the number zero. And if you were to do this gesture in Brazil, you might be inadvertently insulting somebody. And so not knowing some of these things, again, can be stressful. Next slide. Um, Adjusting to different foods and eating customs. Some cultures, of course, you eat very, very late, which can throw people off, or there's maybe different standards or attitudes, for example, even about things like food allergies. In the US, we are pretty good about, when you go into a restaurant, labeling, for example, what might be gluten-free. In some countries, people are not as sophisticated as in the US about that, or not as attentive to that. And so eating can become a stressful experience. Finding a culturally relevant faith community. If you were to go to a place like China, it may be hard, for example, to find a a mosque, or it could be more difficult to find a church if that's something that is important to you. Experiencing discrimination, I think that can sometimes happen more often in countries where there is where the society is very homogeneous and not very diverse, and where people maybe not putting as much effort into diversity training as we do here in the US. And so in some of those cultures, people may feel more at ease to sort of say something that might be quite insensitive here, or somebody would never say here, or can maybe even be offensive. So dealing with that can be stressful. Loneliness, homesickness, feeling helpless, being fearful for your safety, feeling unsure of yourself, all of these things, obviously. It's oftentimes not one of single thing on this list that is sort of really throwing people off, but it tends to be kind of the accumulation of all these small steps of adjustments you have to make in order to kind of make it in the culture that you're actually going to. And so we want to be mindful of these things, and again, sort of be mindful of how we are impacted by those things. And so to the next slide, there I want to show you some warning signs that you may look for, which should be an indication that maybe you should start thinking about seeking help. Prolonged and intensive sad mood, or really any mood, sadness or irritation, should be warning signs that you should take into consideration. Pronounced changes in eating or sleeping habits, of course. Mood and eating and sleeping are tightly interconnected. We know that in mental health. And so sometimes when things go awry with eating or sleeping, then it also impacts our mood. And so there is an interactive effect between these experiences. Excessive anxiety or worrying that interfere with your daily functioning. You cannot stop worrying about maybe your family at home, or you cannot stop worrying about social interactions that are happening. Social withdrawal, not wanting to see anyone anymore, actually becoming physically ill because of stress. And then, of course, more serious self-destructive or suicidal thoughts, or even potentially having thoughts about violent thoughts towards other people. Those are obviously clear signs that it's time to kind of start speaking with somebody and getting some support. And then alcohol and or drug can be, sometimes people can go to those substances to kind of manage stress, which doesn't usually bode well, and a lot of drugs and alcohol can make some of these mental health conditions or stress actually worse in the long term. So not useful. What can we do for stress management? Maybe we go to the next slide. First of all, it starts maybe even with what is your attitude towards stress. If you sort of approach stress with, oh, that's a terrible thing and it's awful and I can't believe I'm so stressed, that you have a negative outlook towards stress, versus actually stress can sometimes be useful. We all need some degree of stress in order to even learn something. Stress can make us more alert in some ways also. So even changing your idea about that stress is an awful thing. Being patient with yourself, allowing yourself to make mistakes, for example, or staying away from judgment. Self-judgment is a really unhelpful thing. And when it's already hard to adjust somewhere, to on top of that then get on your case about things is not helpful. Oftentimes people start fighting with themselves, which that's something kind of to pay attention to and avoid doing. And by fighting with yourself, I mean you might feel down for a couple of days and you might be caught up in your mind, I wish I wasn't feeling so sad. This is wrong to feel this way. I wish I was feeling that. All of that is kind of fighting with your emotions. And the more that we fight with your emotion, it tends to actually prolong them, and they stick around longer and basically then turn from an emotion to more into a mood state. So when you're more accepting of an emotional state that you are in and non-judgmental towards it, it tends to actually go away much more quickly than if you get on your case about it. Trying to see the adventure of study abroad and taking risks in small steps obviously is good. Making friends not only with students in your program, but actually with local students and with people in the culture where you're going. Maintaining your own cultural heritage, that can be especially useful when you're feeling homesick. So maybe bringing something that's culturally relevant to you and have that with you so that you can share it with people there, but also being open to kind of taking in culture from where you're going. Being able to kind of laugh and cry about things. Next slide. Obviously participating in being aware and knowledgeable of what the campus organizations might be that might be enjoyable for you, and learn about the campus culture. Keeping a good balance of work and fun, and maintain healthy daily behaviors. When we're kind of thrown off by differences and by uncertainty, maintaining routines or developing routines can be the quickest way to actually kind of find a way of normalizing living in a different place. So if you're, for example, used to maybe on a Thursday evening, you watch a certain TV show with your friends, maybe introducing that habit or keeping that habit while you're studying abroad can be helpful. Keeping up too much with social media of your friends can sometimes be problematic. It can interfere with you actually adjusting to the culture, but it can also make you end up sort of feeling like you can develop a fear of missing out, and you feel like you need to keep up, and maybe you go on all these extra trips on the weekends to different countries, as opposed to maybe the weekend might be a good time for you to actually relax, take a weekend to yourself where you can actually refresh your mind and your mental health. Dealing with stress as it arises, don't let it accumulate. Exercise. Most of you probably know that exercising comes along with endorphins, which make us happy, and so that's obviously helpful. And I want to talk a little bit about the Wellness Center and how the Wellness Center might be helpful for study abroad. So if you want to go to the next slide. So the Wellness Center can come in various ways to you and can facilitate things for you. Some people choose to come to the Wellness Center actually before they go to the study abroad program, maybe because they already know they have a tendency to be anxious, and you might have a few sessions here at the Wellness Center to kind of prepare you and to develop some better coping skills with anxiety. So that could be useful before you even leave. Can also be useful when you come back, which can sometimes, as you've discussed, can be an adjustment problem, getting used to being back in the US after having been abroad for a while. And if you're finding yourself struggling to readjust here to the US, that may be a time in your life you may consider seeking out help from the Wellness Center. We can also be helpful with things like if you're already a patient here, and for example, you might be on some medications for depression or anxiety. Various countries have very different rules about what you can bring into the country, especially if it's in large quantities. So you might require a letter from a provider, a psychiatric provider. That could be something that the Wellness Center could help with. If we can't provide you with a letter ourselves, then we can sort of help you get connected with places in Chicago that might be able to do that for you. Also, just being aware of the impact of even travel on mental health is good to be knowledgeable about that. For example, sometimes even jet lag and traveling through various time zones can actually sometimes make certain mental health conditions worse. And so kind of being aware of that and making sure that you're trying to regulate things such as sleep and appetite as soon as you arrive can be helpful to kind of help you prevent certain mental health conditions from getting worse as you're crossing a number of time zones. So those are just a few ideas. I think that's about it. I wish you all the best, and